Welcome, everybody. Great turnout. My name is Sarah Boren. I am a City of Atlantic Beach Environmental Stewardship Committee member. I want to recognize Heather Markai. She's our newest ESC member, so we're excited to have her. We have two commission members. And Mark is our chair in the back. Sorry, I didn't see you, Mark. And we have two commissioners here, Commissioner Kelly and Commissioner Bull. Thank you for coming. And I see Chip here from the Charter Review Committee. Anybody else? Oh, Steve Swan is.
Former ESC.
And former ESC member. And former Mayor Ellen Dosser. Oh, great. Welcome. Counselor, well, welcome.
Not selling no water. Oh, that's good.
So I'm gonna hop right in. Find my PowerPoint here. Hold on. There it is. Okay. So tonight's agenda is, I'm just going to talk briefly about welcome our new city manager, Bill Killingsworth. So I'm talking briefly about the ESC, its purpose, and the purpose of the series. One of the main intents of this series is to give the public a chance to share any ideas, concerns, suggestions, complaints, etc. So we offer you two times to get up, one in the beginning, one in the end, and we prompt you with next month's topic to kind of get things going, but you can come up and share anything. So we'll get into that in a little bit. I have a couple of slides on kind of flood resistant property, the ES and resources. The ESC is going to start dribbling out helpful information about kind of how to make your property more flood resistant, resilient, etc. So this is kind of the beginning test. And then we're going to have Steve come up and share all his amazing wisdom, and then open up the floor again and then adjourn. So for those of you who don't know the City of Atlantic Beach's Environmental Stewardship Committee purpose, we're an 11-member appointed citizens, and we are mandated to think about and advise on 4 major topics: maritime forest, parks and open spaces, beautification of public and private spaces, and environmental stewardship in general. We act as kind of a motivating and coordinating body. We are advisory only. We also respond to requests from the City Commission. In 2019, I always like to highlight Commissioner Kelly, because in 2018, she put on the priority list for the city to go after LEED for city certification. And not only did we get that under the pilot at the silver level, we went again to get recertified under gold, and we were the first city in the world to do recertification. So woohoo. Those kind of requests come up, and then we meet monthly. We have our regular ESC meeting every second Wednesday. We welcome everybody to come. We actually have 2 seats becoming open in January, because we have 2 members rolling off. So if you're interested, please apply, and I'm happy to it's really easy application. I'll show you how to do it. And then we have 3 subcommittees: the tree subcommittee, education and outreach, and then sustainability and resilience subcommittee that also meets every month. So that's kind of what we do. I put resilience up here, and I freaked Steve out. He's like, I'm not talking about all of these. I'm like, no. But I wanted to tie flooding and sea level rise to resilience, and I wanted to show that your city is working hard at this, and they have several priorities that address flooding and resilience. Flooding and sea level rise, and partially Senate Bill 64, which we'll get into. Now you need magnifying glasses to see this, but this is in our Sustainability and Resilience Community Action Plan. We have big, hairy, audacious 2050 goals. The commission passed this last year. And usually at each salon event, I highlight the ones that pertain to the subject matter. While I was going through this, everything would probably be highlighted, because it really, resilience and flooding and sea level rise is really pertains to all of these goals. in some fashion or other. So I decided not to, I decided to just blanket say that. So now before I get into the kind of resources and stuff, we're gonna open up the floor to anybody who wants to share any thoughts or concerns, or wants us to tell us how to prepare for next month's topic, which we're inviting JEA to a panel of JEA staff to come talk not only about both of their integrated resource plans, so their water plan and their energy plan, which looks out to 2040, right, Marissa? And then their overall sustainability efforts. So if you have any questions that you want me to kind of pass on to JEA ahead of time, or want to make sure that we cover, this is the time to kind of share it. Or if you want to get up and say, I really want the city to focus on X, or, you know, I have flooding at my property. This is one of the times. Go for it. Yeah, you do, because there's people beaming in to hear you, or live streaming in.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
I'm Ellen Glasser, and I know we focused a lot on the tree canopy in terms of resilience, but I'm just wondering if we are looking at the ground and erosion, particularly on the marsh side, seeing a lot of tree roots that are exposed that maybe weren't, some few years ago. And are we looking at surveying the loss of land mass in terms of what tools we might add to our toolkit for resiliency? And if not, maybe we should. That's my question and comment.
Awesome. I'm writing those down. Anybody else? Go, Mark.
Hi, Mark Abinowitz. Just want to give a special shout out to Steve Swan for his work and the capital improvement plan that we have for both public works and public utilities. It's the right step forward to have a plan like that. It's public. It was in the commission meeting 2 meetings ago. It's really important. It's the most significant manifestation of tax dollars at work. Someone's digging up the road in front of your house, you know that your tax dollars are doing that. So Steve, thanks for doing that. It's really important. We need to figure out how to get the message out that this is what's happening, so people aren't surprised and are complaining. I know a lot of people, why are you doing this now? Why are you doing this now? Why aren't you spending this money over here? But if we have an education program so people understand what the capital improvement plan is, I think we'll be much better off for that.
Pretty comprehensive too. Anybody else? All right, there'll be another chance. So there are a lot of resources out there for flood and resilience. And we'll supply this PowerPoint in a follow-up email to you. I focus mainly on Atlantic Beach information, Jacksonville information, and then kind of national information so that you can find what you need. But how many of you knew that the city of Atlantic Beach has an interactive map? All right, good for you, commissioners and former mayor. And then we have a pretty good webpage that addresses kind of all that Steve's doing, and as well as the planning and community development department. Lots of great documentation there. Resilient Jax is our Jacksonville's chief resilience officer's website. There, she and her team of consultants are about to come out with a report. Bill probably knows a lot about that. And then FEMA and NOAA have these great maps that you can plug in your address and you can find out a whole bunch of information. I actually didn't know about the National Centers of Environmental Information, which gives you all kinds of layers from social vulnerability to, obviously your flood risk, but there's a lot of great information. It draws on from the CDC and like 3 or 4 other agencies. So highly recommend looking at these resources. I also didn't want you to walk away without kind of any concrete suggestions on what you could do, concrete pun intended, suggestions on how to harden or, make your home a little bit more flood resistant. I could go into a whole bunch of pros and cons on each of these recommendations. And then what you can't see because my arrow's in the way is, there's basically 3 ways to deal with sea level rise. It's harden, It's elevate or it's retreat. So hardening, you have a lot of stuff that you can do. I found it interesting that the American Society for Engineers, ASCE, anyways, recommends 2 feet above base floor elevation. So that's your finished floor elevation, or 500-year flood for essential facilities. And now that's coming out kind of, hey, you might as well also think about it if you can afford it for regular property. So that was kind of interesting. They're kind of the experts out there. And then elevating your home. Steve and I served on the City of Jacksonville Special Resilience Committee. I can't remember what year it was, but and we had there was a couple presenters that were talking about elevating homes with breakaway walls, flood openings, and it preserved property rights, etc. So property values. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, and I'm going to read his wonderful bio. I'm going to embarrass him as he gets up here, and I'm now aging, so I got to do my glasses thing. Okay, so Steve joined the City of Atlantic Beach as city engineer in January 2019 and has more than 30 years of environmental and agricultural engineering experience. While studying environmental engineering at the University of Florida, Steve began his career as an intern with JEA in its Environmental Affairs Department. Upon graduation, he spent 5 years at the Florida Department of Environmental Protection in Jacksonville as an industrial wastewater and permit engineer. Upon returning to the University of Florida for graduate studies, he began working with Applied Technology and Management, Inc., a multidisciplinary engineering consulting firm, and soon returned to Jacksonville to open a branch office for the company. After 25 years with ATM working on water resources and engineering products throughout coastal areas of the Southeast US and in over 26 countries, you got to tell me which one was your favorite. Steve retired as Vice President and Chief Operations Officer. He currently serves as the city engineer for our city. Steve's areas of expertise include engineering evaluation, design, and permitting for projects in both the terrestrial and marine environments. He has worked with numerous municipal, industrial, and agricultural clients to develop methodologies and management systems to help assure sustainability and limit environmental impacts. These efforts require the development of elements such as infrastructure plans, wastewater treatment systems, hydraulic modeling and analyses, and environmental impact assessments. Many of these efforts require implementation of a variety of site-specific resource management techniques uniquely suited to local environmental, physical, and cultural conditions and constraints. Steve has performed the following services for numerous clients and projects: total maximum daily load and water quality evaluations, MPDES, which is a permitting, and groundwater permitting. I can't remember that acronym it stands for. Design of effluent and management systems and nutrient management planning, stormwater and wastewater treatment system and design, wastewater reuse systems, wetland system restoration and construction, environmental impact assessments, and development of environmental management plans for construction and operational phases of development. Clearly, we're in good hands. All right.
Appreciate that, Sarah. How do I get rid of yours? Make it go away. You drive.
No, you go. Just minimize, yeah.
All right, well. Sarah asked me to talk about a couple things tonight, and one of them, it's kind of dry, but it's Senate Bill 64, which was passed in, I believe, 2020, and it doesn't seem like much, but it's got a huge potential impact on the city. And the reason why is what it is, it's a bill that was established pretty much because of Central Florida, where groundwater withdrawals are sucking wetlands dry, and they're really scared that they're going to run out of water and that'll stop development and we'll have bigger problems. So they passed this rule, and they figure if all the wastewater plants that discharge the surface waters get out of surface waters, they'll have to reuse that water for either irrigation or direct potable reuse, going back from toilet to tap, basically back into your drinking water system. And we'll limit our groundwater withdrawals. Well, we are here, we don't really have a groundwater withdrawal problem. We've got plenty of water. Our artesian flow is good. We don't have a whole lot of impact on western areas like in Clay County and Suwannee River, Santa Fe River, where the actual surface of the groundwater is dropping out there, but that's primarily due to JA and people to the west that are pulling out a lot of water. But regardless, we got to deal with it. So what does that mean? It means that we got to figure out how to get rid of the about 1.5 million gallons a day of highly treated wastewater that we discharge into St. Johns River. And that with all the work that's been done over the past 20 years on nutrients and trying to figure out if wastewater is a problem, everybody's agreed that what's discharged now is not unhealthy for the river. So we're in pretty good shape. And so we discharge that 1.5 million gallons to the St. Johns. We use about 400,000 gallons a day at Atlantic Beach Country Club on the golf course and for irrigating around the homes. But we've got to deal with this thing. So we've got to figure out what we're going to do. The way things work at the beach is Jacksonville Beach, Neptune Beach, and Atlantic Beach. All the treated wastewater goes into a common pipeline that runs down Mayport Road and out by the little jetties and discharges out into the river. Years ago, all the cities pulled their effluent out of the intercoastal because there wasn't enough flushing in the intercoastal and nutrients were becoming a little bit of a problem. So that's all the beaches cities spent millions to upgrade their plants to advanced waste treatment to get the nutrient levels very low and to put this pipeline into the river to get the water out of the intercoastal where this is flushed out in the ocean a lot quicker. But that doesn't matter anymore because now we have to get rid of it altogether, apparently. So, you know, we're looking at a lot of different options, but, you know, one option is to expand our reclaimed water use system to the other neighborhoods in the city, which sounds great on paper, but you saw what happened around here with IQ Fiber when they started digging holes. It's hard to squeeze more pipes in the ground and it's super expensive. One of the things we are working on is trying to encourage people to use less water. And we're also working to tighten up our sewer system because a lot of our sewer system is clay pipes that were put down in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And the joints get loose after a while and they're all below the groundwater table. So we have groundwater that seeps into the system. So we're trying to tighten the system up by lining and replacing some of those pipes that we've got money for. Another option is deep well injection, which is very common in other parts of the state, but in this part of the state, it hasn't been done before. And basically what you do is you drill a well down beneath the Florida Aquifer where we get our water from. So it'd be down about 3,000 feet or so. And you put the treated wastewater down there and it goes away. It has no environmental benefit. It doesn't do anything but get the water out of the river. But that's an option we have to consider. We could also look at reusing the effluent for potable water. The state of the science is there to be able to do that, but the costs are extremely prohibited. Basically, you're putting 3 treatment plants in a row to produce that water that would go back into your drinking water system again. And we don't have the economies of scale to do something like that here right now. Another option we're looking at is taking our water and cleaning all of it up to reclaim standards, or it could be used for irrigation and shipping it over to JEA across the ditch through a pipeline that actually exists right now on Wonderwood, and have them use that throughout their system for reuse. And as part of that, they came back to us and said, well, what about if we just operated the whole water and wastewater system? We said, yeah, take a look at that too. So they're evaluating those costs, what it would mean for us. But these are the things we're looking at. We've pretty much got to look at everything because of the costs that we're facing. So here are just some kind of rough estimates. Expanding a reuse system throughout all the neighborhoods, enough to get rid of what we have, is about probably at least $30 million. Going to JEA and expanding our system that way, numbers I got back from them actually today is looking at about $42 million with the capital improvements that need to be made. Deep well injection, that's not cheap either. We're going to need at least 2 wells based on a pilot project that JEA is doing right now in Nassau County, and those costs are probably about $32 million in capital. We also looked at what it would take just to send raw water to JEA, and that's about $50 million for us to get the water there and for them to upgrade the plant to handle our additional wastewater flow. And then the last one being a franchise agreement if JEA were to take over the utility from the city and deal with this on a massive basis because they cover 600 square miles of Duval County. They have the economies of scale to do that. So that's kind of the last option that we're toying around with right now. And we're kind of waiting on JEA to do their analysis and tell us what they think, whether it's feasible or not. So it's kind of interesting. We have to have this done by 2032. We've been lobbying hard, as of course you would imagine a lot of the other utilities in the state. Matter of fact, Daryl Calhoun at Neptune Beach and I have been working real hard with the Florida Rural Water Association to lobby Senator Albritton in Tallahassee, who was the author of this bill. And I guess they didn't really understand what the impacts of this bill would be on a small community like us. So they're looking at it. We may have some legislative changes this year that may give us some relief. Could be we are exempted, could be we get another 10 years. I don't know what's going to happen. But in the meantime, we have to act like this bill's in place and we have a 2032 deadline, because it's not that far off when you think about it in terms of the amount of money that's got to be spent, what that's going to do to our rates and how we're going to be able to afford it. And to put all that infrastructure into the ground takes a long time as well. So that's one of the things, probably one of the biggest issues we're facing right now in the city. So we'll see how that goes, and hoping we'll have some legislative changes that'll give us a little bit of relief, but I can't really count on it. And that's all I've got about that. I don't know if you guys have any questions on that, and interrupt me as I'm talking. I don't care. That's fine. It's kind of an interesting topic. Yeah, be here on the island. Yes, sir. Don't know, Greg probably know more about it than I do, but no one's done one here before. I mean, our drinking water wells the wells we have now are down into the Floridan, somewhere between 800 and 1,000 feet, depending on the well. And you want this water far away from your drinking water. So the test well JEA putting in is going to be down about 3,000 feet. It's a deep well, and only 2 well drillers in the state that can do these kind of wells right now. I mean, it's not like an oil well, because it's got to be big, not a little 4-inch oil well. So I don't know how everybody's going to get it done if we have to go that route and everybody in the state starts drilling deep wells. These guys can name their price and in what decade they'll be able to do it. Yeah, you got that right.
Where is JEA's test well?
In Nassau County. I don't know exactly where.
And can you explain approximate heights of, our whatever is above the Hawthorne clay layer, superficial aquifer, whatever, give us kind of the layered look.
So we have a superficial groundwater table here. So if you have a well in your backyard that's irrigating your yard, that's where that's coming from. And that goes down to, how deep would you say our superficial is here, Greg? 50, 100 feet. Then you get down to what's called the Hawthorne layer, which is like a clay layer. And beneath that, you have the upper Floridan aquifer, and then below that, you have the lower Floridan aquifer. And the water that's draining, that supplies that Floridan aquifer, comes from South Georgia and west of here, where the elevations are a lot higher. So we're down here, the water is flowing in up there. So if you poke a straw down in there, because of the pressure, the water comes up by itself. So that's where you get your artesian flow from. If we take the pump and the motor off one of our wells, it'll just flow all over the ground by itself, because it just pops up out of the ground. It's pretty interesting. And then after you get down about, 1,500 feet or so, there's other series of confining units and boulder zones, and we'd be under that with how we'd have to inject this wastewater.
So when we put all that water in the deep well, how clean?
It's clean. It's it's got probably some micropharmaceutical metabolites in it. Doesn't have any bacteria in it. It's got a little bit of nutrients in it. It's pretty clean. It's pretty clean, but it's not pristine, but it's pretty clean.
And our recharge area is still Keystone Heights.
Keystone Heights and to the west and northwest in South Georgia.
So I don't know if all of you know that, but where we withdraw water for City of Atlantic Beach, the only place that part of the aquifer gets replenished is over in Keystone Heights. So it has to rain in Keystone Heights, and then it takes, I've been told, and I can be corrected, about 100 years for that water to percolate to where we withdraw. So if we're withdrawing too much today, it's going to be a problem, which we're not, is what I'm hearing.
We're not, but in aggregate, everybody that lives in Northeast Florida is.
Right.
Which is why you, in the Swanee River, you have springs that flow backwards now. Instead of coming out of the ground, the water goes into the ground. Spring flows, it's a huge concern across the state. Spring flows are starting to slow down. Impacts from septic tanks are finally starting to reach the springs. So now we're getting algal growth, like in Silver Springs. There's a lot of algae growing in the springs. It's a mess. So we got a big problem statewide, but we're not part of it. We're okay.
The saltwater intrusion, I know decades ago, they were talking about saltwater intrusion here in Long Beach. Problem.
It's not what we have our wells. Jack's Beach had a problem a few years ago with some fracturing, and they had they were seeing the salt starting to rise in some of the wells. So they cased the wells off so they didn't draw from those areas. But our wells, we haven't seen any change in salinity. We're in pretty good shape. And as long as we have that good artesian pressure, I imagine it'll stay that way. We're lucky. Sir.
So much a question. Maybe a suggestion. It might be helpful for people to have some kind of fact sheet that talks about the difficulty with addressing Senate Bill 64, so that if they want to write their the state legislators.
That's a good point.
So, if you can pull something like that together, provide people and that kind of information that help you, like, did you know, it would cost us this much, and our budget only has this much coming in every year. There's no way.
Yeah, can't afford the rates to support it. I agree. Yes, ma'am.
So, when you talk about the options to amend SB 64 to extend the time period for exceptions, is that what you said?
Yeah,
Exception would be if the water outfall is so close to the ocean.
An exception based on the size of the community. Right now, there's an exception in there for communities with less than $10 million in revenue. It's very broad, right? So DEP interpreted that as $10 million aggregate for the city, which obviously Atlantic Beach is way above that. But our water and wastewater revenues are less than 10 million. Our wastewater revenue are less than 10 million. So that's the way they interpreted that. So maybe some correction in how that's interpreted might get us exempted to get out from under this. And the reason being that there are a lot of utilities in the state that are not cities, they're just utilities. All they do is operate a utility. So all the revenue is water and sewer based. Or obviously, if you're a municipality, you've got general fund and everything else that they're counting against us. So we're trying to clarify that.
So if people were to weigh in on this with their legislators, I mean, do we want one or the other, or it doesn't matter which?
Oh, I like the concept, but it's too soon, I think eventually we'll be reusing water for either directly for back into our drinking water plants or indirectly where we inject it back into the ground, and maybe, a couple of years later, the water will make it back to your well field again, which is more palatable to a lot of people. Commissioner.
So the bottom line, what do we do now?
Well, what do we do now is we plan. The dollars are in our capital improvement plan. They don't affect our budget yet because we're still a few years out. And in the meantime, we're furiously running down all of these options to hopefully present back to the commission around the first of the year. Here's where we are. Here's what we've got. And at the same time, banging on our local legislature. Wyman Duggan here has been very helpful to us. And I think he's a supporter of getting this rule changed. And Senator Albritton that wrote it, like I said, he seems to be pretty supportive from what I hear of changing this rule to because he didn't realize the overall economic impact, which is multi-billions across the state.
If we're eventually gonna end up drinking this water, well, it doesn't make sense to spend all that money to dig deep well.
Exactly. But there's a hard line in the sand 2032. The science, like I said, the science is there, but not enough people have done this long enough. There's not enough of these treatment systems out there. They're basically triple reverse osmosis systems to make it cheap enough for someone like the city of Atlantic Beach could afford to install a plant like that.
Also, the state has allowed a lot of companies to draw a lot of people out for their businesses. I know that was a big issue around ancient Kentucky and stuff like that, so, I mean, are they revisiting any of that?
You know, there's, I'm on a call every week with a group we call the North Florida Utility Coordinating Group. It's us, the rest of the beaches communities, JEA, Gainesville Regional Utilities, Clay County, St. John's, Town of Orange Park, and, so we're keeping an eye on everything the district, water management district is doing, and they're putting a big focus on municipal side because they don't want to mess with agriculture. They're working with agriculture, but agriculture is one of the bigger users, and the industrial guys seem to be getting a little bit of a pass. You know, look at Fernandina, you got 2 paper mills right there, and between the two of them, they draw almost 40 million gallons a day out of the aquifer. That has a big impact. If you look at a map of the artesian pressure in the aquifer, it's like a big bullseye around Fernandina. It's interesting.
So the pipe you showed, so Jack's Beach, Neptune Beach, and Atlantic Beach all use the same pipe that goes up into the.
Yes, we cooperate as beaches communities.
Right, so the volume is not only ours, it's.
Neptune Beach, yeah, so Jacksonville Beach has to deal with this. Neptune Beach has to deal with this.
Right.
And so we're all trying to figure out the best way to deal
Right,
with it.
so it's their volume as well. And, you know, let's say we decide to transfer it to JA and we somehow get it across to the Wonderwood, whatever it is, wherever it is. They're not gonna do that on their own. They're gonna go through the pipes that we have, correct? Most likely.
You know, at this stage of the game, I can't worry about Neptune Beach and Jacksonville Beach too much. So it's order about us. We'd have to extend our pipeline out A1A to Wonderwood right about here. Either here or here, because all the way down Wonderwood, there's a 20-inch force main for wastewater and a 20-inch water main that aren't being used. Years ago, JEA wanted to, they had visions of providing water and sewer service to NS Mayport. And so if y'all remember when Wonderwood was widened, at the same time, they put these pipelines in from the Ridenhour Water Treatment Plant and the Arlington East Water Treatment Plant, wastewater plant, all the way out to Mayport Road and Wonderwood. So they're there. They're just not being used.
And it's 50 million from our waste department.
Well, it's 42 million for us to get, it's a little over 11 for us to upgrade our plant, for us to get into that pipeline with all the pumping and everything we need. And the rest of it's JEA cost because they have to get it down towards Nocatee. So they have to do some expansion on their pipelines down that way, because that's where all the growth is for the reuse right now.
That's what that thing is saying.
Yeah.
Okay, my last question is, all the options you had up there seem to would, correct me if I'm wrong, increase our water rates. Because we'd have to clean it up or transfer it or
Not all of them.
well it, but except staying current, right?
No, except the last one.
Yeah, gee.
Well, the French-
Right. But the rest of them obviously do.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah. I mean, that's, it, yeah, I talked to the commission about this last year and they agreed, yeah, it's an option we need to consider. I mean, I don't know if it's something we want to do. I don't know if it's feasible, but given the capital costs we're facing, it's an option that I thought were worthy of looking at, and the commission agreed. So
Just because we sell it doesn't mean that they raise rates for.
they cannot, the rates will be the same for the rest of the county.
Are our rates the same as the rest of the county?
No, our rates right now are a little bit less than the county, not much, but if you live outside of the city limits, our rates are quite a bit less because we charge a 25% surcharge on our utility customers outside of the city limits, which is basically from Dutton Island Road to Wonderwood, which is about half of our customers. And another rule I just saw floated by that's on the books is there's some couple commissioners in Gainesville are pissed off because they pay more because they live in Alachua County, not city of Gainesville. So a new rule that they're proposing is that city cannot charge a surcharge for anybody outside of their city limits. So in our case, we lose that 25% surcharge we're charging now, which is quite a bit of money and a good portion of our operating funds. So our rates would have to change to reflect that. That's pending legislation. Yes, ma'am. It tried to go last year and it didn't make it. It just ended up hitting Gainesville Regional Utilities and they blew up the whole utility down there. They took it over. Yeah. Just kind of like Disney. But it's come back again this year to apply to everybody throughout the state. So who knows? I don't know where it's going. The sausage is still being ground in Tallahassee. It'll be a while.
But another thing we could do is continue to conserve. I just want to like make that point.
Point. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But if you said the 1.5 million gallon a day of wastewater, 400,000 going to reuse for like each.
Well, we're about 1.9. So, yeah. Goes to reuse at 1.5 goes to the river. Except when it's raining, that number goes up quite a bit, and that's the number we're trying to get down.
Is it Atlantic Beach clean up that water? Do you do reclaimed water?
We do. Yeah, it goes through some very, very fine filters and it goes through a high level disinfection process and meets all the state standards for what's called public access reuse, which is okay for contact.
You mentioned expanding the reclaimed water system. I think I wrote down $30 million for pipe.
But it was 40 million. Yeah, but 11 of that is us. Our capital cost to put in more filters, more storage, better chlorination system, new pumping system, and a pipeline up to Wonderwood. The rest of that is JEA's cost that they come back and said you'd have to pay our capital cost for us to be able to use this. Oh, there is that. Yeah, that's just a rough estimate of how much we'd have to spend to be able to get enough customers to be able to get our flow out of the river. And the way the law reads right now, you have to get 90% of your flow out of the river. But it's still a problem because nobody waters their grass in the wintertime. So in summertime, it's great. But when you get to the wintertime, then you run into problems. So
You've got feedback problem, that is, you suddenly have all the homes using reclaimed water for irrigation purposes. All of a sudden, there's going to be a lot less use of actual potable water. Which means you probably have to raise rates on potable water.
yeah, but what's interesting in Atlantic Beach is so many people here have shallow wells for irrigation because they don't want to pay to put potable water in your yard. That our consumption rates are some of the lowest in all of North Florida. It's really interesting.
No, it's low, but it's,
It could go lower.
if you took another 600 or 700,000 gallons of reclaimed water.
Yeah, that'll cut down on our potable water use for sure.
You know, I know in my home, I used to have a well. I had hired the rust stains and all the rest of the stuff in my room, so I use city water for irrigation now.
And we thank you.
I cut back on the city water, I mean, like irrigation because of that issue. But I think if you, and I think I'm in a neighborhood that would probably be a prime neighborhood for expanding the reclaimed water system.
Well, it would be because our reclaim system runs through the country club and it's actually stubbed out on Selva Marina Drive. So we can go from there. So that's, you know, and probably at the end of the day, if things don't change, we're going to have to start getting down to brass tacks, and there's probably be a number of options that we're looking at. So we'll figure something out, whatever the lowest cost option is.
And Steve, am I remembering the vulnerability assessment correctly in that our water treatment facility is at the highest point of our.
Yes.
Of our city, so as a critical facility, it's pretty good when it comes to. flooding.
As a quirk of development, we have a wastewater plant in the center of town at a high spot.
Yeah.
It's on Donna Road, Sandpiper.
We don't have to relocate it yet.
No, it's plenty high.
Yeah.
It's good shape. That's where I'd park my car during a hurricane. All right, want to talk about sea level, or you got any more questions on this? Let's move along.
I'm sorry, I have one more. So
All right,
clearly there was enough pollution and impact to the river that the legislature said we need to stop allowing it to go into the river.
oh, it's huge.
Right. So
who's doing that analysis? So if we delay by 2032, if we delay 10 years, 2042,
Mhm.
what's the consequence to the environment, to our health, to fishing, to swimmability? I mean,
I would
more algae.
I would say none. You're going to the Jacksonville Environmental Symposium next week, right? Well, you'll see the state of the river report, and you'll see the nitrogen and phosphorus being discharged to the river over the past 20 years. This is something I was working for the First Coast Manufacturers Association back in the late 90s when this first mandate first came down. We were working for the industrial folks at the time, which took the right attitude was, well, we don't like it, but we don't want to cause a problem to the river. So we're going to use the best science and we're going to apply it the best way possible. And we're going to make sure this thing works. So we worked with the St. Johns River Water Management District and the Department of Environmental Protection for 15 years to develop this total maximum daily load, which is the amount of nutrients that can be safely discharged to the river without causing a problem. And the number was down here. Everybody was discharging things way up here. And now for nitrogen, the nitrogen number is actually down here now. Phosphorus numbers is still a little high, but the improvements over the past 20 years in the St. Johns have been remarkable. They really have.
Isn't that phosphorus slipping drainage?
A lot of it is. A lot of it is. Yeah.
I'm done.
All right, you're done. All right. No more wastewater nutrients. Let's talk about sea level rise. All right, a couple things we'll talk about tonight. Our sea levels in Florida, how it might impact us, what we've done and what we are doing in terms of planning, which is our vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan. I'll talk a little bit about some of the projects we are implementing this year and over the coming years. And then I'll touch on beach renourishment because everybody's obviously that's a big thing with actually, let's do that first, just in case we don't get to the other end of it. With beach renourishment, we are part of the Duval County Shore Protection Program, which is a federal program that's paid us, I think 69% by the federal government. Bulk of the remainder of that by Tallahassee, by the Department of Environmental Protection. And then the remainder, which is 5 or 6%, is City of Jacksonville. They are the local partner of this. We are not. We don't have anything to do with beach renourishment. Neither does Neptune Beach, neither does Jacksonville Beach. But we coordinate with them. Matter of fact, I was on a call with them at lunchtime, just a coordination call. And it's a long-term project. It was a 50-year project that was expiring in a couple of years, but it's been administratively extended. I'm not sure how long, but quite a way. So we don't have to worry about losing our beach renourishment. But right now, the plan is it's under design right now. The project's going out to bid, and we should have sand pumped on the beach in mid-March of next year, and also replenish any of the dunes that have been impacted between now and then. So they don't want to put the sand on the beach in the fall because we have the northeasters and the winter storms. So they'll wait till the springtime when it's a lot more stable. Put the sand down, rebuild the dunes, plant more sea oats, and then hopefully we're good for a while. But it's interesting because there's a lot of people that haven't lived here that long, but if you grew up here, you remember jumping off the bulkhead at high tide because there's no beach. You wanted to go surfing at high tide. You have to crawl over the rocks and fight the rats and jump right into the water. But now we look at our dunes are, 50, 60 feet from that bulkhead, and it's a massive amount of sand, which is great. And you saw how well that did during Matthew. That really saved us. So, we got calls after last year with Ian and Nicole. A lot of people were really upset that the dunes were being crushed. And it's like, you don't know what it was like. They're still good. And they are still good. We have plenty of protection. Fortunately, it looks like we'll make it, hopefully, knock on wood, through this hurricane season without anything bad. And then we'll have the whole beach berm built back up 4 or 5 feet in some places. Like if you all remember what it's like after they renourish the beaches, we have a nice big high berm and the dunes will be rebuilt. And that's coming in March of 24. So we'll just get that discussion out of the way. But I'm happy about it. It's been a lot of planning to do that. So around here, we got a tide gauge at Mayport. It's been there for 90 years. And I'll show you a chart in a little bit. It shows steady increase over the past 90 years. But it's not just the increase, it's the rate of change that we're starting to see and is being predicted. whether that's from climate change, whether it's from CO2 in the atmosphere, it doesn't matter to me and it doesn't matter to us as part of this discussion because it's happening and we got to figure out how to deal with it. And the fact that we're pretty flat here, we're surrounded by tidal waters. We have a high groundwater table. It's hard to get rid of water here because it is so flat. And I'll show you a couple pictures in a little bit that'll kind of show you what I mean. And we already have parts of Atlantic Beach now this past week with these king tides that we've had that always seem to happen when a northeaster's blowing. I don't know what it is, but every year a northeaster blows when we have our highest tides of the year. So you could not have gone to Dutton Island if you wanted to, unless you wanted to drive through saltwater. Out on West Plaza at Gladiola, that area, those streets were underwater for a good bit of the day. Up by our Buccaneer lift station, which is at Wonderwood and Mayport Road, you could sit there and watch the water come out of the storm drains and start flooding the streets. It was pretty interesting. So it's happening and it's happening more and more. Chip, you remember that when you were a kid? I mean, years ago, was it that bad? I don't recall it being like that.
In the mid-90s, that I remember, in the fire department, they were ordered to pump out the streets in Old Atlantic Beach. What was happening is the flood water was rising, sewage was backing up and literally in the street.
Oh, yeah, we fixed that though.
Yeah, that was all fixed.
Yeah,
Yeah, the flooding was finished.
yeah. But when that water comes up, if you look, it's hard to see now, but you can look in this ditch right here, right now, that all week that water's been 6 to 8 inches higher than it normally is. So if we get a real big rainstorm now, it's harder for us to get the water out because the water levels are higher. So it's going to be increasingly difficult in the future. All right, so what do we know for sure? Because I don't like to really operate on conjecture. The predictions that I'll show you are all conjecture, but it's the best we've got to go on. But what do we know for sure? We know that pre-glacial times, greater than 10,000, 20,000 years ago, sea levels were pretty high and Florida was pretty funky. That's over on the left. There wasn't much to it. But 10,000 years ago, during the height of the glacial period, Florida was big. I mean, we had dry land stretched all the way out to the continental shelf, 60 plus miles offshore. But then you've got now is what we have now. But the point of showing that is that over the eon, sea level rise in the world is not a stable thing. And this is kind of goes back 20,000 years, kind of looking at estimates on sea level rise and rates of change. And what you notice from that is they're saying the sea levels come up almost 120 meters in 20,000 years, which is about 400 feet almost. But over the past 5,000 years, it's been very, very stable. A lot of the archaeological work folks have done in Florida over the years have kind of been able to prove that because our occupation by people goes back on 10, 12,000 years. They've found some real interesting things of where people settled and why. And they're determined over the past 5,000 years that it's been pretty stable. But what's happening now is that since 1880, this is kind of globally, it hasn't been that stable. And sea levels come up quite a bit on a global scale. Now, different areas of the world are affected differently. I'll show you the Mayport gauge, which is different than is global average. And what's interesting is towards the end of that chart, where it gets to the top, you see a tan line there. That tan line is based on sea level rise based on satellite data. And the reason it's different than the gauge data, which is in the blue, those like the gauges we have at Mayport that are stationary, is because there's subsidence happening at the same time. So the ground's sinking while the sea level rises. So the apparent sea level rise in a lot of places is higher than what it actually is. In Mayport, this goes back to 1930. It's been pretty steady. We don't really see an arc in that curve going up in terms of rate, but it's been about an inch every decade. You can't argue that. I mean, it's there. The gauge has been there, and it's different years are different, but when you average it out over the years, you see what's happening. And so since past 90 years, we've seen 10 inches of sea level rise at Mayport, which is pretty interesting. About an inch a decade. But going forward, this is what NOAA has, and a lot of the a lot of the scientists come together and develop these sea level rise curves. So there's different organizations, the UN has one, and there's a bunch of other ones, but in the US and in Florida, we tend to use these NOAA predictions. This is from 2017. There's actually they have a newer prediction out now, but it's a little bit different than this, but the way the Florida statute's written, when we do our analysis, for whatever reasons, we still use this 2017. That'll probably change in 10 years as the science gets better and they add the existing data to it. But we're looking at here, if we kind of go off that heavy red line is what most people use for planning, which is their intermediate high prediction of sea level rise. So 2044, we're looking at over a foot and about 2.5 feet by 2069 potentially. The 2119, we're showing about almost 7 feet of sea level rise. That's so far out there. That's a lot of conjecture. The error bars get real big. They're still pretty big at 2069. At 2044, I would say, based on the data we have, that's probably a fairly decent estimate that we need to plan for about a foot of sea level rise by 2044. So anyhow, that's what these are the numbers that we use for our planning. And it's important to us, like I said, it's flat. We're generally at elevation 10 feet or less right now. And we have two main canals that drain most of the city. One is Sherman Creek right here, which the storm sewer system serving Sherman Creek goes all the way back to Atlantic Boulevard. So basically from Neptune Beach, comes through here, goes down Mayport Road, goes down A1A by B&M Bait and Tackle, and it dumps into Puckett Creek. It's flat, it's pretty narrow, it's got a long ways to go. West of the city, western side of the city, east of Mayport Road, everything drains to Hopkins Creek, which, as you know, around Aquatic Gardens, we have a lot of problems there right now. It's a lot of water and we can't get it out of there, which is a project I'll talk about in a little bit. But those are basically the two main drainages that we have from the city. West of Mayport Road, everything drains directly to the intercoastal. It's not that big of a deal from a drainage standpoint. So this right here shows the lighter blue is our current mean high water, which is the average of the higher of the high tides every day. And the darker blue is representative. I know you can't see the streets, but I'll show you some other stuff here shortly that you will. The darker blue is our nuisance flooding that we get, which is quite a bit higher. We bump it forward into 2044. We look at that nuisance flooding, it gets a little bit bigger, and looking at the 2069 numbers, we got a good part of the city that could be affected by nuisance flooding, which is sunny day flooding like we've had this past week, northeaster blowing, king tide. Nothing to do with rainfall, nothing to do with a hurricane. Kind of zooming in a little bit, if we look at Saltaire, which is at north end of Howell Park, where this starts, when we're in 2044, we're looking at in 2069, we're looking at, some significant street flooding on a routine basis, half a dozen times a year, 8 or 9, I don't know. And out by West Plaza, where we already have problems on the western side of the city, a lot of those streets will be impassable several times during the year. So this slide's got a lot of words on it. I promise you the rest are pictures and stuff. But this basically describes what we did when we were saying, okay, how do we plan for the future? And we were kind of ahead of what the state and the state regulations by a couple of years. So we're changing things as we go forward, but we made a good shot at it. And the state's pretty much doing exactly what we did. It was what we take our 100-year flood right now, which a lot of you guys are familiar with. If you have to pay flood insurance, you're in the flood zone. And we move that flood zone forward into the future to 2044 and to 2069 with higher sea level rise conditions based on the graph that I showed you, as well as changing rainfall patterns, because rainfall patterns are changing as well. But right now, the 100-year floodplain, we've got 334 parcels that the center of the property is in the floodplain right now. It's quite a few. But the thing to notice on these FEMA maps is that they calculate the 100-year floodplain based on hindcasting, based on data that we have. They don't look forward. So they're not looking at sea level rise when they develop a 100-year flood map. And these are updated maybe every 8 to 10 years, something like that. Last time ours were updated was 2018. So if you're in that 100-year floodplain, it means you got a 1% chance every year of being flooded and a 26% chance over the life of a 30-year mortgage. That's if you live in the floodplain. 26% chance of being flooded over the life of a mortgage if you live in a 100-year floodplain. It's just statistics. So
Yeah.
So insurance is another story. Our planning horizon, we looked at, this started a couple of years ago. We'll be updating this to use the time periods the states want us to use, which is a couple of years off of what we have right now. We looked at 25 years because we're fairly certain, and also it's about the life of a mortgage, and 50 years because when we're doing major economic investments in infrastructure, we expect about a 50-year life out of that equipment. And structures that we're building. 100 years is just doesn't mean much really, but we took a look at that anyhow. This is a chunk of the FEMA 100-year mapped flood insurance rate map. Right in this area is where you're sitting right now, which is in a 100-year flood zone. The tan area is the 500-year flood zone. And what you'll see is what FEMA calculates as a 500-year flood zone right now is essentially what we predict will be our 100-year flood in another 25 years. So we looked at modeling future conditions. We looked at 100-year storm surge. We looked at 100-year rainfall. We utilize that with a very good stormwater model we have for the city right now that we use for our stormwater management plan update back in 2018. The odds of getting a 100-year storm surge and a 100-year rainfall event at the same time aren't very high, but for planning purposes, that's how FEMA does it. So that's how we did it. So citywide, looking at projected 100-year floodplains, that tan is what we have now. In 2044, you can see it expands quite a bit, and it expands quite a bit along the Sherman Creek, Sherman Canal drainage basin, like we just talked about where we're sitting, as well as in the Hopkins Creek area. 2069, a lot of the core cities now in the 100-year floodplain, as well as a lot of salt air. The country club don't pay attention to that because this is based on the old development, not the new development. When we had what we used was topography from LiDAR, which is laser looking down from an airplane and measured all the elevations. And what we had at the time was 2007. That's been updated. So within the past year and a half, we have new data that does reflect the country club. So our updates to the study will include better handle on the country club. West of Mayport Road, it looks pretty dicey out there as well too, depending on where you are. And if you throw in the 100-year prediction, you grab a boat, I mean, and realizing we're not talking about a Category 3 storm hitting Atlantic Beach. If we do, we're going to be flooded, but we can't manage around something like it, and we can't invest based on a Category 3 storm for the most part, other than hardening structures, but we can manage and we can plan with a 100-year flood. So kind of zooming in a little bit, we're looking at the where we are right here in Sherman Creek, the 100-year flood. That's it in 2044, which includes quite a bit of salt air. In 2069, like I showed you, it ties in a lot of the core city areas now in the 100-year flood zone.
Well, you're on the verb.
Well, I will tell you that the vast majority of the houses in Atlantic Beach, even the new ones, especially the newer ones, our code requires that they be at least 2.5 feet above the 100-year flood elevation, where a lot of cities only require 12 inches. So we've got a lot of built-in resiliency with our newer homes, and a lot of the older homes are even higher than that. And to date, one of the things you look at for planning is repetitive losses. How many times have a particular house been flooded more than once? Like if you go to St. Augustine, it's a book. If you come here to Atlantic Beach, it's 7. and
No, no.
that we know of. And 5 of those are just for several thousands of dollars, and the other 2 were not catastrophic either, which is pretty darn good as far as I'm concerned. But it also means we can't get a lot of free FEMA money because we don't have that much damage yet. But now we're going out to West Plaza. If you know, West Plaza is kind of tucked away. It's sort of hard to get back there off of 14th Street. But it's low, and 25-year flood zone is going to cover a bunch of that area, and 2069 is going to cover a significant amount of that area, especially the streets, because the streets are generally lower than the lots. So all this stuff went into our vulnerability assessment, which we took all this data and we said, okay, what's the impact? And what do we need to look at? We need to look at our critical facilities, our pumping stations, our water plants, our wastewater plants, look at roads, look at schools, things like that. And so all that went into the vulnerability assessment, which we updated in 2021 to capture the outside of the city all the way up to Wonderwood, because we have realized that a lot of our utility infrastructure up in that area is pretty low. And we're going to be updating it again this year. I was able to get grant funding to pay for pretty much all of it. So we're going to update our plan this year, but we're also including, Mayor Glass, this kind of goes to your question. We're including a marsh baseline survey in this work. What we're planning to do is fly a drone back and forth over the marsh. It'll give us the elevation, it'll give us the vegetation types, and we'll set that baseline. We'll know what we have now in terms of open water. We'll know what plant types we have, because the plant types change as the water levels rise. The Spartina changes to black needle rush as you get higher. So if we come back, repeat the same study 5 years, 10 years, you'll be able to identify any changes in the rate of change. You'll see black needle rush converting to Spartina grass. You'll see pine trees will be dead and converting to something else. If we have, depending on how bad the erosion is, you'll see creek opening up, especially along the intercoastal. We're seeing a lot of that right now. So that'll kind of lock us in for future generations to be able to look back and say, this is how it was. So what the vulnerability assessment did was basically define the sensitivity of each one of our critical assets to being exposed to flooding now and in the future. And then we kind of ranked everything in terms of how bad. So because obviously you can't fix everything at once. So let's figure out what's the worst and go from there. What we did find out is that in 2044, we're estimating almost 1,100 building parcels that'll be impacted by a 100-year flood, which is quite a bit more than what we have, the 340 something we have now. Which that this is a couple of years ago, but the value was 234 million. 2069, if the predictions are correct, we're looking at over 2,700 with almost 600 million in 2020 dollars of property that will be impacted by a 100-year flood. So yeah, it's something real we need to look at. In terms of critical facilities, it's kind of tough to look at, but the take-home message is we have a number of lift stations, some wells, and we have some road segments that are vulnerable to flooding both in 2044 and obviously more in 2069 as the water levels get higher. This is what it looks like on a map. Where we mapped out all of our pump stations, water plants, wastewater plants, city hall, fire station, Atlantic Beach Elementary, churches, things like the community centers, and look at, okay, what do we got to watch out for going forward? And so all that got sifted down into an adaptation plan. It's like, okay, we have this data. What are we going to do with it now? And as Sarah said earlier, there's only a few things you can do. You can protect it. You can figure out how to let the water flow through it. You can move it. You can figure out how to avoid it. There's only so many things you can do. We will be updating. This plan was done in 2021. We'll be updating this one next year as well. So what came out of that plan, and I encourage you to go look at it. It's on our city webpage under projects, under vulnerability. There's links to both of these reports. And we try to write them in fairly plain language, so it's not You're not reading a whole bunch of differential equations and stuff. So we ranked everything, red for things we got to do now, yellow for things we really got to start looking at in the next year, green for a year to 3 years, and then longer term in the lighter blue, out 4+ years or so. So we ranked all these projects. We looked at areas west of Mayport Road, our major drainage ways, our roadways, critical utility infrastructure, critical public facilities such as the Public Safety Building, City Hall. And this all kind of sifted its way into our capital improvement plan. And this is a section out of the capital improvement plan that was adopted by commission last week. And I just went ahead and just took projects out of there that are either directly or indirectly related to resilience and sea level rise planning. The bigger ones on the utility side that you see there are upgrading our water plants to make sure they're flood proof, make sure we have proper backup power, make sure we have modern pumps that can increase the pumping rate. If we have a major main break because of a flood or something like that, we can still pump enough water to keep the system pressurized. And also looking at a number of our lift stations. We've been working pretty hard on that. I've got pretty good grant funding coming in to help us with this. The state's been one thing DeSantis has been good at has been releasing money for resiliency projects. We've been able to get our fair share. So we're looking at our Buccaneer lift station right now and the lift station over on Cavallo, which is subject to flooding. Because if we have to evacuate from a hurricane, when people come back, the main thing that'll keep them from coming back is if we don't have water and sewer. So we're making darn sure whatever situation we've got water and sewer. And the amount of investment we're making in this infrastructure, we're looking out 50 years to make sure we're good. A good example, it's kind of hard to see, but we installed with grant funding a generator at the south end of City Hall that will run City Hall and the commission chambers. And if you go over there and look at it, you'll see it's up pretty high on a pedestal. And that is actually, that gives us a couple feet above the predicted 25-year, 100-year flood, which is why that thing is kind of ugly, but it's the only place we could put it. But anyhow, you see why it's up that high. But that's one of the kind of thinking ahead. If we're going to spend money, put a generator in, let's make sure we got it where it's going to work when we need it. On the public works side, mostly looking at a lot of stormwater projects. Biggest one this year we're taking on is going to be the Aquatic Gardens project, which is out to bid right now. We've been able to get that almost 100% grant funded, which is taking a while to get there, but it could be probably about a $3 million project. And what that's going to do is open up that ditch around Beaches Aquatic Club. There's a 90-degree bend in the corner. We're taking that corner out. We're replacing the culvert by Sierra Grill and Wells Fargo Bank. Because right now, if you had gone out there last week when we had that rainstorm and looked at that culvert, you would have seen the water up about 12 inches higher on one side than the other side, because it's just holding the water back. And some other improvements there, as well as improving the stormwater pond at Aquatic Gardens. We're going to dredge that out so we can pump more water out of it preemptively before a storm, so we could get more storage and help protect all those homes that are built in the 100-year floodplain. Man.
Is that also in the south area?
Yeah, a lot of it's related. That drains directly into that ditch.
Yes. We do that. We land You're talking about Dora Street?
Looking at some land on Dora Street, which is at the north end of that ditch, up near Simmons Road, almost to Dutton Island Road, and to potentially use that as part of the overall stormwater system improvements from there all the way down through to Atlantic Boulevard.
You need to send it out.
No, not yet. Not yet. I'll be presenting on that to the commission next week. So our commissioners can make a decision on that. So kind of real quick take home points if you're still with me. So in the future, we're going to more areas are going to be impacted routinely by high tides, like what we saw this week, and even higher. Areas that flood now are going to get bigger and wider. There's going to be more homes and businesses that aren't impacted now, but will be impacted, and that may be through you having to pay flood insurance in the future. Which is, since FEMA's slowly changing the program, so the folks at the most risk pay their fair share of the premiums, it could be pretty daggum costly in the years coming. Rainfall's increasing, so we can expect more localized flooding. We can't, like you saw last week, we can't get the water off these streets fast enough in this town. The good thing is a storm like we had now, last week, we had no house flooding and the roads were basically passable and the water was gone off the road in most places a few hours after the storm, which is good. So it's just something, when we live here, it's flat. We can't get rid of the water. It's just something we have to live with. But the important thing is to keep it out of people's houses, keep the roads passable as much as possible. That's kind of what we're shooting for. And we're working hard on it. And that's what we're doing. And that link, if you're gonna send out something with that link, we have interactive maps. I can pull them up here if you want, but it's got all these flood layers on there. So you could zoom into where your house is and you can kind of see what we're thinking the impacts might be in the future, just to give you some ideas. And that's all I got on that. If you guys aren't bored, I don't know what time it is, but if you guys want, I can just show you some pictures and some things from Hurricane Nicole last year. It was the last time we had some real high water. So kind of looking at the past 4 big storms we had, Matthew, Irma, Ian, and Nicole, what's interesting is that you see the high water at the Mayport gauge, which is about what we get at the north end of the city. It's pushing 5.6 feet, where mean high water is around 2.2 feet. And I also have on there is when that high water occurred, what the tide was, which is that second column, expected high water. And then I kind of took a look at what the peak storm surge was. So if you look at Irma, we had a peak storm surge of 6.4 feet, but the tide wasn't very high. When Ian came through, we were at 2.6 feet predicted tide, which is pretty high tide. If we had that 6.4 feet of surge on top of the high tide during Ian, we would have had some problems. So we're playing a dodge the bullet game here, just hope that storm doesn't hit during the king tide at high tide. If you look at a chart of Irma, you can see that the peak surge was actually here at low tide. I mean, granted, it came up real high when the tide came up. This is what was predicted at Mayport, and this is what was measured. But if you take that peak surge and move it over to the peak of the tide, that peak surge was way up there. Nicole came through, the peak surge was right at the high tide, but it wasn't that much of a surge. But you'll see in these pictures what that meant for us. Yeah, you can see it right there. If we move that over during Irma, would have been trouble. And Nicole, right outside the window here, you can see the normal water level and what it looked like during Nicole. It was up well over a foot. Looking north and south off the bridge right here. At the Mayport boat ramp, it was pretty much non-existent. Most of these pictures are at the peak of the storm. Singletons, we weren't going to dinner at Singletons that night. Okay, this is our Buccaneer lift station, which is our master lift station, pumps about half of the sewage in the city to our wastewater, or half the sewage in our utility area to our wastewater plant. It's kind of right where that star is, right there at corner of Wonderwood and Mayport. The green is a 100-year floodplain. The purple is a 25-year, 100-year floodplain. So this is when Nicole was bearing down on us. That both sides of the road are usually dry. You could go out there and watch the water come back out of the storm drains. It was quite interesting. So, and that's that big white rusty thing is a generator out there we're replacing, and our controls are here and our pumps are right here. So a little while later, everything's underwater. And what scared me the most was this green thing right here is the transformer that runs that generator. So that transformer, we're probably 3 inches from that transformer blowing out. So one of the things we're doing as part of our adaptation work is we're flood proofing this building here. We're replacing this generator, putting it higher. we're sealing up our wet well, so stormwater or the floodwaters don't get in there. And we're getting rid of this transformer and putting it up on the pole over here. So we don't have to worry about that. But those are the kind of things we're doing.
I think Steve lost sleep that night.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was ugly. And that's in Renault, which is right outside the gates, looking back towards Mayport Road. It was quite interesting. Now, if we go down towards West Plaza, where I was showing you earlier, again, this is a 100-year flood. That's a 25-year predicted flood. Right at Carnation, we're underwater there. And at West Plaza and Tulip, we're underwater there. At Dutton Island, at the entrance to the island, you could take a boat all the way out to the island. And it probably wasn't that high this past week, but it was pretty darn close to it. In Tide Views, we have this 2 stormwater ponds here. One serves the city, one serves DOT from the Atlantic Boulevard. It's only one pond during Nicole. It completely filled up. So kind of interesting, but anyhow, that's all I've got. Thanks for staying awake. I appreciate it. It's not an exact science, so a lot of moving parts, but there's certain concrete things we can plan on, like you saw at the Buccaneer lift station. We got to do something there. It's only going to get worse. And if we lose sewage pumping capacity for half of our utility system, that's not a good thing. Sure.
And I'll send them out by email as well, as long as I have your email.
And put my number on there and email address too, Sarah,
Yeah.
because I'm always available to talk. I like this stuff. It's kind of interesting. That's half the reason I'm working here is because I live here and I wanted to make sure we're kind of doing this the right way.
So the marsh, we're not gonna wait 5 years to do something, are we? Or we're gonna, I mean, the survey, you're gonna take a survey now, I know that's in works.
Mhm.
And then we wait 5 years before we survey it again. So what do we do to protect the marsh in the meantime?
Not a whole lot. And I mean, I hate to be blunt about it, but we don't own any land on the marsh. I tried to talk the city into buying Lily Street as for protection for those houses. That didn't go over so well. But we have it's all private land all the way up to the marsh. So if you live on the marsh and your house is low, you need to raise your house. You know, city's not going to do it for you. We may help. We're probably going to help because the state's forcing us, because of other reasons, to extend water and sewer service out to West Plaza and other areas that don't have water and sewer. We have about 33 homes on septic tank out there right now. People that live there don't want water and sewer service though, because as soon as you put water and sewer service in, you don't need a septic tank and drain field and a well in your yard, and you're gonna have more developers building homes in there. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But in terms of marsh protection, all we can do is help protect against the stormwater. If we see areas that are eroding badly, most of the erosion problems we have are out towards the intercoastal channel where there's a lot of waves from boat wakes. But if you look over the aerials from the past 30 years, you see these creek mouths widening up and the marsh receding. We've got a National Fish and Wildlife Federation grant application in right now to do some pilot studies out there and different things to help stem the erosion. Because if we can keep that marsh healthy, the hope is that marsh, the sea levels come up. The hope is that the marsh will grow with the sea level. Some places it has, some places the marsh is drowned. But if we can try to keep these creeks from opening up and have as much marsh area out there as possible, what that means is when we have a storm that has big winds from the northwest, like Matthew, when it came by, it'll reduce the wave impacts on the shoreline, which will cut down on erosion and help protect the homes. Mayor.
So. We like the 35-foot limit. But do you think there is any potential that with charter review, you will look at, like building off level where these repetitive flooding properties are based on some of these maps, so that you can build like above 8 feet where you have a breakaway first floor. Because I don't know how these people can get insurance on their homes if if they're at such great risk. I mean.
Well, right
is that a
now,
Risky proposition with Tallahassee, I mean, what is the feel for that?
well, right now, you're required to build 2.5 feet above the current 100-year flood. Which from a federal standpoint, which the minimum is 1 foot, that gives you quite a bit of cushion going into the future. That's new construction. And one of the changes that proposed, that may go through or be looked at again by the commission soon is moving that so that you have to be, if you're in a 500-year floodplain, which is essentially the 100-year floodplain in 25 years, then your base floor elevation needs to be 2.5 feet above the closest adjacent 100-year flood elevation. So that'll help protect more homes there. As far as going up 35 feet, the charter is silent about where it starts, where you start measuring 35 feet. So if you're required to have a finished floor 2.5 feet above the base flood, your 35 feet starts at that finished floor elevation. If that makes sense.
And then on top of that, the city could incentivize people, like we have a ton of redevelopment happening, right? So we could incentivize them to build with resilient features, green building standards, you know, you either give them a cash incentive or tax abatement, like there's a whole bunch of tools in the toolbox to do that, to then kind of get better built buildings out there.
But y'all, as well as I do, I mean, the way Atlantic Beach is kind of being redeveloped now, everything's sort of moving to the west as property values increase. I mean, more people buying knockdowns, and we have people now that are trying to build on lots that aren't built on. And the reason they're not built on is because they're adjacent to the marsh. They have big setbacks. There's no water and sewer. They're in the 100-year floodplain, and they're built on trash piles, because a lot of areas in the west side of our city were used by a mosquito control district back in the 50s and 60s to try to stem the mosquito problem. The easiest way to do it was, instead of buying dirt, was let people dump their garbage there. So we have it mapped out pretty well. So we know where most of all the areas are, but a lot of the west side of the city, there's quite a bit of buried garbage out there. Because it's not marsh anymore, because they fill in the areas that would hold water. So they fill them up to dry them out, and then they put dirt on top of the trash. If you look back at some of the old pictures from the 60s, you can actually see some of these landfills being constructed by the East Duval County Mosquito Control District. And Atlantic Beach was readily used those sites because they're close. We didn't operate them, but cities sure used them.
Is the Doric Drive property on one of those files?
It is not.
Yeah.
It is not. Look at the agenda packet. All the information should be in the agenda packet for next Monday.
I have a question about Mayport Road. I know this isn't really, doesn't seem to be flooding there, but it is.
What part of Mayport Road? In the city?
Yeah, in our city.
Okay.
And our limits. But it is a huge opportunity to develop, right?
Yes.
correctly, Right? As we think about the future, what would you recommend that we think about?
Well, the DOT is out in front of us, right? Because
Right.
the DOT
I-
is going on is
Road diet, yes.
so the DOT looks at sea level rise in their projects.
That's good.
So that's something to look at during the design of that project.
They're not.
Yes, it is. Is that your daily evening motivational?
I wish I was that organized. They're not planning to elevate it though. I know they are.
No, but they may plan to improve the drainage system, and I'm not sure what to do, and I haven't seen it. If y'all don't know, the DOT is looking at Mayport Road from Dutton Island Road down to Atlantic Boulevard to take it to 2 lanes instead of 3. And make it more pedestrian friendly and safer, and so things like that. I hope that'll help spur some good development along Mayport Road.
But as far as, like encouraging economic development and businesses, is there anything that we should think about on the horizontal to not add to more flooding issues or whatever? Is there anything we should be thinking about now?
Well, we have our city codes, which they have impervious area coverage limitations and require you to collect and retain stormwater from a 25-year storm, which is a big help.
On commercial as well?
Anybody else? All right, well, I appreciate allowing me to talk.
Told you we were in good hands. We're having, okay, does anybody want to did they think of anything, want to share any thoughts, concerns, ideas? Go for it, Mark.
Make this happen next year.
Make what happen next year?
Want an update next year?
Anybody else? Okay, we have a few more people. I don't know if anybody, we could do a popcorn round, but I think this is a fairly good exercise because everybody takes something different away from presentations. It also kind of helps the presenter kind of hear what everybody actually heard. And usually we have everybody participate, but we can just kind of say, whoever wants to share, what were their main takeaways, or at least one takeaway that you heard? Maybe you learned something new or something really hit you hard, resonated. Does anybody want to share? Something? You did not fail. People are just shy.
I'll share.
Go for it.
I didn't know about the progression of the flooding so much in Atlantic Beach. I think that was a safety thing. And when we talk about like safety measures and the things we can do all around, knowing about that can actually. I learned something new from a safety measure.
I took a homework item away from creating a fact sheet. Yes.
I learned about the water crisis. I mean, I was vaguely aware of the specifics, Steve, on the impact of eliminating water and having drinkable water, potable water. I was not aware of that. And planning for that. I was impressed that we're thinking ahead. And then related to the sea level rise, which I've been interested in for quite some time. What impressed me was we're planning ahead to the best of our ability. We have what's our elevation here? 8.5 feet?
10 feet or less is what I heard.
10 on average. So there's not a lot we can do. I was also not aware that the west side of Bayport Road drained into Hopkins Creek.
West side of Maple Road is not.
The east side.
East side.
East side. West side goes to the intercoastal.
It's actually north of that mountain road. Yeah. About 358.
You did a great job. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, go for it.
I just wanted to say, I'm just really impressed with the presentation and that we have such a good engineer in charge here.
I'll find out 25 years.
And I was happy to see that our house wasn't in the 25-year.
That's everybody's go-to.
Yeah, anyway, thanks so much.
Yeah, Steve made a great point in regards to the storm surge and high tide. Y'all, as a public safety message, keep an eye on that. At the same time, you were not having problems in Atlantic Beach. We were very busy with the fire department at the west end of the Trout River, and we were working in waist deep water, rescuing people and such, and a lot of the fires and issues. Don't find cars from the Trout River area. All that is practice water. In fact, the truck that I drive, my sign truck, all the bumpers are rusting off. Because we were working in waste deep water. The only difference was where the time was, because there's a delay in time.
Yeah.
And y'all were saved by, basically how the time was cycle. So be careful. Keep an eye on it. They say leave.
Well, and another shout out to Steve, we didn't have a CIP before he came. He really got us into shape. So huge kudos to him on that. It allows us to plan ahead. He assessed, he measured, he evaluated, and then he put it all into terms that we could understand.
And I guess.
Well, we'll probably talk 25 years, right? So next month's speaker topic is we'll have a panel of staff from JEA to talk about their energy and water resource management plan that looks out into the future and their overall sustainability efforts. And then in December, we will have an expert on solar. So round of applause for Steve. Thank you. And yeah, bring your neighbors.
Good job.
Who's Marco?
Great job, sir. Thank you.
They're still deciding. It's a little bit of a. Oh, you're fine.
Are we-
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
All good.
Groundwater, yes. Yeah, that's why water, poke a hole deep enough, it comes sticks up in the air. Yeah, It'll go 14 feet up in the air.
Okay. I just want to make sure I heard.
Yeah, yeah,
Neat.
yeah, it is, got it. Everything, we're all connected.
Yeah, and we're there. It's like doors and-
But it's higher. You figure they're 70, 80 feet up. So that water is 70, 80 feet higher than we are here. So that's why it pushes up. Yeah, call me if you got any questions. We'd like to talk. Yeah.
I can call
I'm always willing to talk to that. Suzanne.
Yeah.
Remember, yeah. He's not be up here for the grand opening of his place yet. I've been fighting with Bob Burke for 3 months. Yeah, Bob's throwing him outside. It does.
And so, yeah. He's and kind of everything in the land tomorrow. And that. So that, you'll be there.
I'm gonna try to.
Yeah, good.
What time is that?
And then I
Yeah. I've always been working on that for a long time.
Yeah.
Looks great. I went and pulled the cover off the other day to kind of look at the display. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I said that it's always like, and then, and he just started, the building, and that's
Cool.
that he can do. The lighting.
Yeah. Well, it looks quite professional.
And, yeah, and, we got all the measurements anyways. It's really great and you're great.
Do you still want to meet and talk about Dora, or you want to wait for the commission? Okay.
Yeah.
It's not something I'd be worried about if I was buying the property, but it's city property.
Really? Yeah.
There's a t-shirt place that has got containers where they're spray painting, they have chemicals in it.
Yeah,
We need to make sure, there's nothing on the ground.
yeah.
And there's a couple of dirt mounds out there where people have dumped stuff years ago.
Yeah.
So we kind of want to open that up, make sure it's just
Yeah.
trash and not something bad.
Something else.
Right.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, Bill. Bill, for what?
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
A few questions I didn't want to like ask.
No, that's fine.
Like, pretty much stuff.
Let's do that.
She did one, I mean, that's one of her original. And then this one, I made a sweatshirt too. Yeah.
We haven't been back up there. There are just gonna be.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Well, they do. Well, we time. But the first one that was one that was right up. And they're going back down to Miami and they're. Yeah. But yeah, the guy thought this was great. Promoted. He said, "Oh, I think they're not."
Have a good night.
It was great. The second thing on out.
Right.
That's what was. Always.
Yeah.
So.
Hopefully, in the week.
Yeah, well, it really does is her children. Yeah. Same one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need it internal. So there's one called the people more like. Whatever pathway you. So, yeah, whatever your mechanism, you can choose whatever you're involved. But even one thing I think about that, it's totally water space. You
don't want to. Start moving.
You know, like it's secretly. It's not. It's not just water. That's like that. So.
Yeah. You gotta look at where the. Right now, he's long years.
Or, I mean, that's just me. I'm just. Yes, he did, but stuff like that. It's not on the 20, and if you give it. It'll make you survive every 5 years. Or you could do something, but it's just like. It's a lot of, so. He does, unfortunately, so. Because they're almost. And now we're all measuring things. So that was a huge. A bit of a meet. So, I'm not saying it's totally easy, but we were able to, I mean, I can put you in touch with Brian Bedell and that's what we should like, that so skinny. Staff, but I think they found it. I love it. And it.
Yeah. Was our.
Yeah.
It's not maybe they have all these patents, like, and then, well,
Yeah.
What it would take for us.
That's pretty good.
To give you like, really hard to done.
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't have the. Well, so it doesn't. It doesn't matter. It leaves, this is leaving cities. It's how much greenhouse gas. How much waste are you diverting, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's much bigger, higher level. It's not per building. Yeah, and Amanda was a nice person. So, but paint's pushing for it. I'm gonna put on our priorities. We need a ability this one. Program, incentive, it's not mandated. But we need to start. Reducing our greenhouse gas, or conserving more water and energy, you know, that stuff is really just the way to do it. So, but so it starts, switching off that.
The judge should come up Friday. So look at that, and should we budget that, friends?
Oh, thanks Suzanne for coming.
Yeah.
Or.
Oh, I did.
You did, okay.
Um,
So I.
when is it?
It's October 17th, so I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like I'm waiting for a conflict. I'm waiting for something to land that might conflict with it.
Yeah.
That was the thing, but I will try to get you an answer.
It's not, and I will not send you actual things.
I should stop recording.